A 48-year-old black CEO walked into her own luxury hotel and was told, "We're full. Guests only." She didn't argue. She made one phone call, and everything changed. She didn't want anything fancy. No welcome party, no red carpet. Just a key, a warm bed, and a night to reset before a board meeting she hadn't planned on attending in person. But when Victoria Langford stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Oakmark Grand Hotel in Des Moines, Iowa, nothing went as expected. She walked in with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need attention. Her soft loafers didn't click. Her tailored slacks weren't flashy. And her blouse, a dusty blue silk, was clean but plain. A canvas duffel hung off her shoulder. No assistant. No entourage. She looked like any guest. Or maybe someone trying to be one. Behind the front desk, a young receptionist was chewing on the end of her pen, her acrylic nails tapping against the keyboard. She glanced up and offered a routine smile, the kind reserved for people you're about to turn away. "Checking in." Victoria smiled, polite as ever. "Yes. Under Langford, Victoria." The girl's fingers moved across the keys, then stopped. She blinked, lips tightening. I don't see any reservation under that name." "That's all right. There's a suite always held open for me." "Ma'am, we're actually at full capacity tonight," the girl replied. Her tone shifted slightly. "You need to have a confirmed booking to stay here. For guests only." Victoria's smile didn't drop, but the weight in the room shifted. She looked past the girl to the gold plaque behind her. Oakmark Grand, A. Langford property. Her name wasn't just on a reservation. It was on the building. "I am a guest," she said quietly. "And more than that, I own this hotel." The girl blinked again. For a second, she looked stunned, like Victoria had just told her she was the Queen of England. Then her lips curled into a skeptical smirk. "You own the Oakmark." Victoria nodded, calm. The girl leaned toward the desk phone. "I'm going to have to call the manager." "Go ahead." Across the lobby, a couple in golf polos looked over. A man sitting near the fireplace tilted his head. Victoria could feel it, the shift. That familiar weight. The look of someone must be lying, and we think we know who it is. Moments later, a thin man with a crooked tie and a clipboard appeared from a side door. His badge read Assistant Manager, Neil Dorrance. He took one look at Victoria and immediately started speaking with forced cheer. "Good evening. Is there a problem with your reservation?" "She claims to own the hotel," the receptionist said, a little too loudly. Neil hesitated. Victoria kept her eyes on him. "I don't claim." "I do. My name is Victoria Langford. You'll find it on every quarterly report and every executive board memo. I'm here for one night. You should have a suite held under the owner block." Neil adjusted his glasses. "Right. Just give me one moment, please." He turned toward the back, muttering something into his walkie. Victoria stood still. She didn't fidget, didn't raise her voice. But the air was getting thicker. That's when security appeared. Not aggressively, not hands-on.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and it doesn't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
But enough to make a point. One stood near the elevators, the other beside the coffee bar. Just in case. Victoria's gaze didn't move. She didn't flinch. But inside, she felt it. That quiet fire rising in her chest. Not just because they didn't recognize her, but because they thought she didn't belong. Again, she could have pulled out her ID. She could have shown emails, ownership papers, photos from the ribbon cutting 6 years ago. But instead, she stepped back, pulled out her phone, and made one call. That's all she needed. But she knew this wasn't just about a room. It was about something much deeper. And the people around her were about to learn that the hard way. Victoria didn't pace. She didn't sigh or look at the time or start recording, like some people might have. She just stood in the corner near the marble pillar, phone still in hand, quietly waiting. The call had lasted only 26 seconds. She didn't have to explain much. She didn't even raise her voice. Just gave her location, her name, and said, "I've been denied access to my own property. I need this resolved immediately." And then she waited. At the front desk, The receptionist kept typing, as if the screen might somehow change the truth. Neil, the assistant manager, returned with a folder in hand. He looked nervous, but when he saw Victoria still standing there calmly, he tried a different tone. "Miss Langford," he said, emphasizing the last name this time. "I think there's been a mix-up. We just want to verify." Victoria cut in gently. "You can verify all you want. I'm not moving." Neil looked past her to the security guard, who didn't budge. The staff was frozen in a quiet standoff, unsure whether to escalate or apologize. Neither option felt safe. She noticed the stairs. 3 women sitting near the window, whispering behind their hands. A young man holding his laptop half open, pretending not to listen. The doorman was no longer greeting anyone. And that's when she saw it. The receptionist, checking her phone under the desk. Scrolling. Searching. Probably Googling her name. Probably expecting nothing. It would have been funny if it weren't so familiar, because it always played out the same way. People thought they knew what power looked like, what leadership sounded like, what ownership wore. And someone like her, brown skin, textured hair pulled into a neat puff, no designer purse, no loud jewelry. She didn't match the picture, so they questioned it. That's what stung. Not the denial, but the fact that it wasn't even surprising anymore. That was the beginning. Kayla almost laughed. "That's unreal." "It shouldn't be," Victoria said. "It should be normal." She stood up. "I don't need you to be perfect, but I do need you to be aware. Every guest who walks through that door, old, young, dressed up or not, deserves dignity. Start there, and you'll never have to recover from moments like last night again." Kayla stood too. "Thank you for talking to me. I mean that." Victoria nodded once and left her standing there. But as she walked back through the lounge door, something in her felt lighter, because the message had finally landed where it needed to. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the Oakmar Grand had returned, at least on the surface. Guests wheeled their bags across polished tile. Coffee cups clinked gently at the bar. A small family asked about nearby zoos. The world moved on like it always does. But inside the management office, it was different. Brent stood by the window, watching the valet rotate cars in front of the main doors. Carlos typed quietly at his laptop, drafting the official internal memo. Marta, the HR lead, reviewed new onboarding modules with a stony focus. And in the center of it all, Victoria read through a fresh stack of evaluations, personnel files flagged for review. She wasn't angry. She was exact. "I'm not here to punish," she said aloud, scanning one report. "I'm here to prevent repetition." Carlos looked up. "We're adjusting our interview process for front desk hires. Not just for skill, also for empathy. Pattern testing. Bias evaluation." "Good," Victoria replied. She tapped her pen once on the desk. "And put me on the rotation starting next quarter. I'll show up at random properties. Quietly. Like I did here." Brent raised an eyebrow. "You want to be what, a secret guest?" "Not secret," she said. "Just anonymous. Until I'm not." Carlos grinned slightly. "That's going to make a lot of people nervous." "Good," she said. "Let them sit in it. The real version of this job doesn't come with warnings." She stood, slipping the papers into a folder. "Have the new training go live by next Friday. Include story modules. I want staff reading actual experiences from guests, not fake scripts. I want real words. Human ones." Brent nodded. "Consider it done." Victoria left the office, walking back into the lobby. She stopped near the reception desk, where a new agent had taken over. He smiled immediately, respectfully, like someone who understood she wasn't just another suit walking by. She returned the nod, then looked around. Everything seemed still on the outside, but she could feel it, small cracks forming in old habits. And that's how real change begins. Not with a press release, not with a public apology, with quiet corrections, repeated until they stick. She made her way to the elevator, headed back upstairs to grab her things. Her flight wasn't until late afternoon. There was time. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, she stepped out, heels soft against the carpet. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh linens and lemon. The suite door stood ajar. Housekeeping must have just finished. Inside, her bag was packed, neatly zipped. Her laptop rested on the desk, charger wrapped. Everything was in order, except one thing. A note, folded, sitting on the nightstand. She opened it. Miss Langford, thank you for your grace. I'll be better. Kayla. It wasn't fancy. No envelope. Just lined notepad paper and careful handwriting. But it meant more than a pre-written company apology ever could. Victoria folded it once and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, a car was waiting. As she exited through the lobby, the same doorman from the night before opened the door with purpose. Safe travels, Miss Langford, he said warmly. We hope to see you again soon. She smiled. You will. As the car pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back. She didn't need to, because she'd left something behind, something heavier than luggage. She'd left the weight of being misjudged, the quiet ache of having to explain her worth. And what replaced it was better, understanding, discomfort, growth for them, and maybe even for herself. But there was still one last thing she wanted to say. Just not to the hotel, not to the staff. This message was meant for anyone who'd ever had to stand in a room and prove they belonged. The ride to the airport was quiet. No small talk from the driver. No music playing from the radio. Just the soft whir of tires on pavement and the occasional blink of a turn signal. Victoria sat in the back seat, with one hand resting on her purse and the other holding the folded note from Kayla. She hadn't read it again, but it was there, like a reminder, like a small piece of proof that the previous night hadn't been for nothing. She stared out the window at the rows of brick buildings, the corner gas stations, the faded signs for mechanics and bakeries. This wasn't where she'd planned to be this week. And yet, maybe she'd been meant to be here all along. Not for the board meeting, not for the business, but for the conversation. Because the truth is, this kind of thing didn't shock her anymore. She wasn't angry that it happened. She was tired that it kept happening. Tired of how often worth gets measured by assumptions. Tired of how fast people sort you into categories without asking a single question. Tired of being made to explain things she should never have to say aloud. Yes, this is mine. Yes, I built it. Yes, I deserve to be here. And yet, she wasn't bitter. That's the part people don't understand. Victoria didn't carry bitterness. She carried memory. And memory could be powerful if you used it right. As the airport signs came into view, she thought about her younger self again. That girl working night shifts in cheap flats and stiff uniforms. No makeup. No recognition. Just drive. Just the belief that someday she'd build something no one could take from her. She had done that. But buildings weren't enough. Because even with 17 properties and a team of executives reporting to her, people still looked at her and saw something else. Something less. So what do you do when the world refuses to see you? You make sure you see yourself, clearly, without apology. And then you walk it anyway. You hold your ground. You speak plainly. You don't beg for permission. You act like the door was always yours. Victoria stepped out of the car, grabbed her bag, and nodded at the driver. No more words needed. Inside the terminal, people hurried around her with their coffee cups and roller bags. TSA announcements echoed through the ceiling speakers. She moved quietly, almost invisible again in the rush of strangers. But in her chest, something settled. She had taken a moment of humiliation and turned it into a mirror for everyone in that hotel to finally see themselves. And mirrors don't lie. They show you who you really are. She hoped Kayla would grow from it. She hoped Neil would learn. She hoped Carlos and Brent would follow through on every promise made in that office. But if they didn't, she'd still be standing. She always had been. Because dignity wasn't something anyone gave her. It was something she never gave up. And for anyone watching, anyone listening, who'd ever been dismissed, doubted, or spoken to like they didn't matter, Victoria had one final thing to say. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are. And walk like it, every single time. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them learn. Let them wonder how they missed it. And when they finally see you, make sure they never forget. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something deep in your chest, share it. Leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak to truth, power, and the people who refuse to be ignored.